All right, everybody, good afternoon. Now let's take a look at some of the lower profile defensive linemen. Same rules as the video this morning. We're taking a look at guys who can play defensive end in a 3-4 or 3 tech, maybe a little bit of 5 tech in a 4-3. But now we're trying to spend a little less money. Basically, these are guys who probably, because you never know, are going to command somewhere in the $5 to $7 million a year range, whereas the guys in the first video are going to command 7 mil plus. Some of them are going to command 15 plus, maybe even 20 plus. But these guys are like the next level down, and we're going to need some of them in all likelihood, unless we really like our current guys, which we probably shouldn't. We should definitely kick the tires on at least some of the following players. And we've got a lot to get through, so let's go ahead and jump right in here. Starting with an interesting one, Larry Ogunjobi. You guys may remember him last offseason. He was one of the more interesting storylines. He had just completed a bit of a breakout year for the Super Bowl losers in Cincinnati. After a pretty decent 4 years in Cleveland, he went to Cincinnati, had his best year ever, and then he signed a big contract with the Chicago Bears. And then it was pulled out from under him because he failed his physical, and he ended up in Pittsburgh for a much less lucrative contract. And he proceeded to, in 2022, have a less prolific year by a pretty good amount. And now that big payday may be forever out of his grasp. But this is still a good player. This is a player who had several productive years in Cleveland and then was very productive for 1 year in Cincy. Pittsburgh just, he didn't put up the numbers that you would have expected, but he's still a pretty good player, and there's still reason to believe that he's going to be worth something. Now, what is he worth? It's kind of hard to say at the moment. He's only going to be 29 this year. PFF's never really been a big fan, by the way. In 2022, they said he was just okay. If you go back to his breakout year in Cincy, they thought his run defense was so bad it canceled everything else out. But again, PFF is just a tool. You can't use it as the end-all, be-all. And at the end of the day, you put all these things together, Spotrac tells a pretty compelling story of him getting less than $3.5 million a year. So actually, not even the $4 million I was talking about when I started this video. That would probably be a pretty decent investment. A 2-year, $7 million deal for a guy who's had good production several years in his career already. That might be worth something. If you're not looking to spend top dollar, but you want to get a guy who has a chance to give you top end production, Larry Ogunjobi would probably be near the top of my list. So let's definitely write that down. Okay, next up we have Akeem Hicks. This is a guy who's been around forever. He's a bigger guy, and look, he's spent most of his career as a 3-4 end, and it's a little unconventional for a 3-4 end to be 340 pounds, and he basically is. But I think the key point to make here with Akeem Hicks is that he's been doing it for so long. There's no doubt that he can do it. And at the end of the day, you as a coach need to decide if your defense wants to have guys like that or if you'd rather have smaller guys. Some of the guys that I'm going to look at in this video series, 50 pounds lighter than Akeem Hicks, and I still want them to potentially play the same position. So just keep that in mind. Now, Akeem Hicks is definitely getting older, but he's still grinding out respectable seasons as a defensive lineman. Now, he has an issue staying healthy. You can see over the last several years, he's had seasons where he's played very little. He's had seasons where he's played about half the year. The days of him playing every game, like he did for the Bears back in the mid-tens, I guess you would say, those days are probably over. But we are talking about a guy here who, when he is healthy, is very productive. He was part of the #1 defense in the league in 2018 for the Bears, and he's probably got something left. I mean, PFF actually graded him out okay for 2022 when he was picked up by the Bucks on the cheap and was just over there grinding. Go back to 2021. Good grades. Really good grades, actually. So Akeem Hicks, you're definitely paying a little bit for past performance. You're definitely paying a little bit more than you might be comfortable with given his age and his propensity to be injured. But you can always cross your fingers when it comes to stuff like this. And look, we were talking 2 years, 11 million, 5.5 average annual salary. is that worth it for a guy who might miss 5 or 6 games, but give you really good play in the 11 or 12 games he does play? If you're going to stick in that 3-4, I kind of feel like the answer is likely yes. Like, this is a guy this is what he's been doing his whole career, basically, been an end in a 3-4. So, Akiem Hicks, definitely high on the list. Another name here, we've got Dean Lowry. He's been doing 3-4 defensive end stuff for the Packers lately. Not the most productive career, but he's had a couple years that were solid. A couple of 3-sack years. He had a 5-sack year in 2021. 2022, he ended up on injured reserve, was not nearly as productive as a pass rusher, but this guy built a fairly respectable career in Green Bay. Nothing remarkable here, but you're not going to have to pay a remarkable price. This is a guy who's probably going to go for somewhere around $5 million a year. Maybe it's going to be like 2 years, $10 million. PFF grade is passable, but not particularly good this most recent year. But if you look in previous years, it is a little bit better. Like 2021 was his 5-sack season. So definitely a candidate. Got to at least be a consideration. Another name. This is a guy who's definitely seen his best days in the rearview mirror by now. But Jordan Phillips still probably has something left to give in this league. He's only going to be 31 this year. This is another guy who's big, but he's played in 3-4 defenses before. He's not really a nose tackle, so asking him to do 3-4 end stuff, possibly even a little bit of 3-tech stuff, is in his wheelhouse. And sometimes you got to be unconventional with the kind of players you get to fill certain roles on your team. Now, you can see that in 2019, this guy had 9.5 sacks as a tackle for the Bills. Since then, he has 3 seasons where he's combined for, 6.5 sacks, right? So those days are long gone, and honestly, 2019 looks like a big aberration. Hasn't been even close to that since, but still capable of playing in this league. He's done some stuff as a defensive end in a 3-4. He did it with Arizona last year, the previous 2 years, and then in 2022 he went back to Buffalo. No huge production, but also, he belongs in this league. He definitely has a place in this league. PFF, not a big fan of him, mostly because, as usual with these guys, I've noticed kind of a recurring pattern here. Not good run defense scores, but again, just because of that you can't be completely put off a defensive lineman just because of that. There are going to be guys you bring in specifically to plug the run. Those are your nose tackles. That's what I was talking about in my video yesterday. But today, we're looking at guys like this, and I think that Jordan Phillips should be probably a consideration at you would hope you could get him somewhere around $5 million a year, maybe even a little bit less, maybe $4 or $5 million, because his most productive days are clearly so far behind him. But yeah, that's the way I see it breaking out right now. Another interesting name. We've got Taven Bryan, former first-round pick, was a disappointment, didn't last past his rookie deal in Jacksonville, but found his way to Cleveland and actually had, not a great year, but probably the best year of his career, right? Goes to Cleveland, has a 3-sack season, plays every game but one. We're not exactly talking about something special here, but it was probably the best year of his career. He started almost every game, which was something he didn't do any of his previous years. I'm not going crazy about it, but he belongs in this league. PFF thought he played passably. I'm not going to go crazy about it or nothing, but PFF thought he played pretty passably and better than he had played in previous years for Jacksonville. And at the end of the day, you might end up only spending $6.5 million a year. Yeah, that's not so good, is it? Yeah. I kind of put Taven Bryan in this video just to illustrate this bizarre kind of effect where a player can be in the league for years and clearly be not that good and not that interesting. But just because they were taken in the first round half a decade ago, they're supposed to get more money than guys who are clearly better players. I think Taven Bryan's an example of that. So if this projection is true, that's a mystery to me. Why would he get more than Akiem Hicks? Why would he get more than Ogunjobi? Why would he get more than even Dean Lowry? So Taven Bryan, I'd be interested in bringing him in for maybe $4 million a year, something like that. But yeah. That draft pedigree sometimes goes a long way. Okay, another name here. We've got Shy Tuttle, currently of the New Orleans Saints, relatively young guy. He's only going to be 28 this year. He's been a not overly productive, but he's one of those grinders. Okay, he's not going to put up monster stats. He's not going to pressure the quarterback constantly every game. He's not going to make his presence known in the stat sheet game after game, but he's going to play snaps. He's going to be a fairly effective player. He's going to get it done. You're going to pay him mid-level, maybe even a little below a mid-level deal, and you're going to be reasonably satisfied but not blown away with what you get. He's one of those guys. PFF thinks that he played okay last year, although this guy stands out in that it seems like his run defense grades are consistently much higher than his pass rush grades. So this is a guy who's more of a run defender. And look, bottom line is the Seahawks, that's kind of what they need right now, okay? We need run defenders. We couldn't stop the run at all last year. Yes, we need to rush the passer better, of course. You always need to rush the passer better. But if we go into 2023 with the same run defense we had in 2022, I can't imagine the season going any better, and it'll probably go a lot worse. So this needs to be a priority. A guy like Shy Tuttle, who's more of a run stuffer, despite only being 300 pounds, like there is value there for sure. And Spotrac estimates 2 years, 12.8 million. So you're looking at a little less than 6.4 million a year. That would be very close to what I think we would give Poona Ford if we wanted to keep him around and stick in the 4-3. So you're dealing with a very similar circumstance here with Poona Ford. The difference is you've seen Poona Ford in a 3-4 and you know it didn't work that well. Shy Tuttle's never played in a 3-4 to my knowledge. So would you rather bring in Shy Tuttle, or would you rather keep Poona Ford for the same amount of money if you are really going to try to run this hybrid defense? Kind of feel like you might want to mix things up a little bit and go get Shy Tuttle. Now, if you're going to a 4-3 purely, then I'm a little indifferent to it, but these are the considerations that we're going to have to make. Okay, another name here, we've got Chris Wormley of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he just ended the season on injured reserve, but he's been a productive player throughout much of his career, mostly in 2021. He had a breakout year playing in a 3-4 defense as an end. He had 7 sacks in 14 starts, 15 games, so he missed a couple games, still had 7 sacks, over 50 tackles, very productive, was on a defense that is, generally speaking, playing well over his career. He's also spent several years in Baltimore. He even played nose tackle for a little bit for the Ravens. So this is a guy who's had some versatility in his career, proven that he can do multiple things, wear multiple hats. And, I mean, PFF liked what he did even in 2022 when his numbers were way down. So this is a guy who's shown he can defend the run well. It's a guy who's shown he can get after the quarterback at a pretty decent clip. And now he's a free agent. And because his sack numbers were way down in 2022, he's probably not going to get the big money he would have gotten. I would think that this guy would be pushing $10 million a year if he had just had the 7 sack season. But because he's coming off a year where he only had half a sack, and he also had the big injury at the end of the year that will actually cost him some games, you could get him for 2 years, $12 million, according to Spotrac. Now, is that something that you want to do knowing that he just tore his ACL, had a little bit of a down year, and you're not going to get to even see him until partway through the season? I mean, that's the gamble, right? I don't know. I don't have a great answer there. It's going to depend on what your doctors say, right? I'm not a doctor. I don't have access to the doctors who are looking at Chris Wormley. But based off the way he's played the last few years as a Steeler, and even before then as a Raven, if you could get him on this price, and he makes a comeback and is 100% of what he was, then you're probably going to be getting a lot of bang for your buck there. I mean, this is basically the same contract they suggested with Akeem Hicks, who is going to miss some games and is also getting very old. So if you could get Chris Wormley, who is younger, less overall injury prone despite having a serious injury in the recent history, and has shown the ability to be probably more productive than Akeem Hicks has been in a while, then I think you've done very well for yourself. But you're going to have to weigh these pros and cons here, basically, is what I'm trying to say here. So these are some of my favorite options that we could get if we're kind of bargain bin hunting, but we still want to make a good investment on the defensive line. There are plenty of other guys out there. Part of the issue here is I don't know what kind of defense we're running yet. Once I do, it'll be easier to eliminate some of these names, but these are some of my favorites. Let me know what you think down below. See you guys later. We're going to talk more about this. Go Hawks.